Hello, my name is Cole Kennedy. I am a graduate student at Arkansas Tech University, and this is my Centralia disaster presentation. I have some background for you. Centralia is located around 47 miles from Allentown, Pennsylvania, and around 54 miles from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Centralia, Pennsylvania is known as one of the most interesting ghost towns in America. Centralia was once a successful mining town that can trace its coal mining roots back to the 1850s and had its highest population in 1890 with a population of 2,700 people. The population at this time consisted of coal miners, those who were related to coal miners, and people that owned businesses or had services that serviced coal miners. Some factors affected Centralia's population slightly, such as the Great Depression and the world's movement away from coal products and more toward petroleum products. The population of the town slowly began to shrink throughout the first half of the 20th century, and in 1960, only about 1,500 people lived in Centralia. The beginnings of a disaster. In May of 1962, the city council decided to clean up the town's landfill in preparation of the Memorial Day festivities. The way they decided to do this was by setting the landfill on fire, which back then was a common thing to do to landfills. But this landfill fire would not turn out to be as successful as the city council would have hoped, because this fire somehow spread into the underground mine shaft. Before the town knew it, there was a raging fire occurring underneath the town of Centralia. Responders did try to suffocate the fire by closing off its access to oxygen, but the mine and the fire had become so large and it was impossible to find all of the accesses to oxygen that it had to close all of them off. The fire spread so fast that it became clear that there was no way to contain it, and any solutions that they did come up with were too expensive, so they decided to close down the mines permanently. The underground coal mine fire raged on, and the ground measured at 900 degrees in some places. And some people began to complain of headaches and nausea due to carbon monoxide buildup. Some people even reported their basements filling up with smoke. The ground beneath the streets became very unstable, so the streets began to buckle and tilt, which ultimately made them undrivable. Even the foundations of some houses began to tilt. The local highway cracked and collapsed. Trees bleached white and petrified, and some people complained about breathing problems. The final straw came on Valentine's Day of 1981 when a 12-year-old boy named Todd Dombrowski, pictured on this slide, was walking through his grandmother's yard when a sinkhole opened up and dropped him into a cavern that was 150 feet deep. Luckily, there was a tree root that laid across the hole that Todd was able to hold on to while his cousin ran and got help. This event was important because this was what pushed local and state authorities to report this to the federal government, which got Congress involved. The evacuation. After estimating the cost of extinguishing the fire at over $500 million, Congress decided to pass a $42 million relocation package that paid the residents of Centralia for their homes to try to encourage them to leave the town. Many of the residents took the government's offer, and the town went from having a population of 1,000 people in 1980 to just having 63 people in 1990. In 1992, the state of Pennsylvania condemned all buildings in Centralia and began buying all of the available land so that no one else could buy it. In 2002, the U.S. Postal Service stopped delivering mail to the town, and the local government eventually turned to eminent domain to try to convince more people to leave town. Centralia in the present. Today, the town of Centralia is seen as kind of a tourist spot. Tourists visit the town to admire the emptiness of the ghost town and to see the smoke rising from the holes in the ground. The state did bulldoze all empty homes and buildings that were left here, which was unliked by the current and past residents of the town. Only about 5 homes remain in Centralia, along with 1 or 2 abandoned, undemolished homes. Outside of the houses, all that remains are the church and the cemeteries. According to the World Population Review, Centralia, Pennsylvania's population has increased 30% since 2010. The town went from having a population of about 10 people in 2010 to a population of 13 in 2021. The COVID-19 impact. When the COVID-19 crisis happened, the state saw that people were still holding events and gathering at the Graffiti Highway when there was a lockdown in process. The company called Pagnotti Enterprises, which owned the land, received so many complaints that they decided that the risk was too high to continue to allow people to gather at Graffiti Highway. So the company decided to cover up / bury the highway with truckloads of soil to keep people away from the old highway. This was the most recent thing that was done to the town to try to keep people away from it. And on this slide is a picture of Graffiti Highway. Permanent evacuation / relocation. Permanent evacuation / relocation is a very sensitive and controversial subject, even if it is for a good reason to protect the lives of those involved. People do not want to leave their homes behind for financial reasons, emotional reasons, and historical reasons. The connection to emergency management. In emergency management, evacuations and relocations can be tough things to accomplish because people do not want to leave their homes behind. In many cases, like Centralia, people would rather stay on their properties or in their houses and face the consequences instead of evacuating or relocating to protect their lives and their families. People have rights and protections, and emergency managers and other decision makers cannot force residents to leave their homes or properties if they do not want to. They made the correct decision. The leaders that were in charge of relocating the residents of Centralia did the best that could be done. They bought out homes and properties that belonged to the residents that decided to leave. They bulldozed homes so that they could not be repossessed or lived in by others. They passed laws that kept homeowners in Centralia that stayed from passing on their homes to relatives or selling their homes, and other things that were detailed in this paper. Centralia is one of the more successful evacuations of a town during a disaster, even though it is frowned upon by the locals. Ground surveying. One thing that can be done today is for the state government to hire ground surveyors to go to Centralia to survey the area and determine how safe or dangerous areas of Centralia are. This would not only be beneficial to the locals, but to tourists too. Even though the goal is to keep people away from Centralia, there's no denying that they will most likely come anyway. Ground surveyors and other workers could block off the most dangerous areas and recommend safer areas for tourists and the last few residents to travel through. More barriers and warning signs. Tourists need to see how dangerous the area is by seeing how hard the locals are working to keep people away. More barriers and warning signs could be erected to warn people and tourists that visit the town how dangerous the area is. Erect a museum. A museum could be erected in one of the local towns that could be filled with the photographs that were taken of Centralia before and after the coal mine. The museum could display detailed pictures of what Centralia looks like today, so that tourists could be satisfied by viewing the pictures instead of venturing into Centralia. Write more about this. There were not a whole lot of in-depth scholarly articles written about the Centralia disaster, so it should be recommended that more should be written about this. Things could be written about the psychology of the situation, the way the residents and the descendants felt about the disaster and relocation. More things like the study should be published that look back at the disaster and make the connection to emergency management or disaster management. Here's the conclusion. Centralia, Pennsylvania is still relevant. Even though the mine fire of Centralia occurred many years ago, we are still feeling its impact today. Studying and learning from disasters such as this can strengthen our knowledge and strengthen emergency management as a whole. Past disasters in history should not be forgotten. Permanent evacuation/relocation. Permanent evacuation/relocation, even though inconvenient, is logical when protecting the lives of those involved. Emergency managers can learn from the Centralia disaster and other disasters like it and apply that knowledge when deciding on whether or not they should relocate a town away from a disaster. It's not over. Authorities say that this fire could burn for another 250 years. Here are my references. Any questions, as David S. Pumpkins would say, and I'm glad this GIF works, or GIF, however you pronounce it. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I will gladly answer any questions that you have. Thank you.